Hello everyone and welcome to I Am God's Witness. Today, I have 3 more true stories about angels that I'm sure will inspire you. Before I begin, be sure to check the video description for more information related to the topics discussed. Also, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to this channel. It will help get our content recommended to more people on YouTube. Thank you. In our first story, a lady learns how to look for the signs that angels have answered our prayers to God. Here's what she wrote.
Growing up, I never really thought about the existence of angels. I was raised as a Christian, but was never that spiritual. It wasn't until recently at age 20 that my religious and spiritual knowledge started to grow, and I started to put the signs together. I had heard random people online talking about their experiences with angels, and I always wondered, if they're real, why haven't I had any experience like that? One day, I decided to ask for my guardian angel to send me a clear sign if they existed and were ready to help me. During this time, I was experiencing anxiety and some stress, so I was looking for hope and comfort. A minute later, I turned my music on and the first song that played was one that I never really listened to before. However, what struck me was the lyrics. By the end of the song, I felt different. The song kept repeating these lyrics. Forever and ever always I love you. Whenever you need me, I'll be right there by you. Whenever you call me, I'm there when you call. Whenever you're falling, I'm there when you fall. Wherever you're going, I'll be right there showing. Our love's always growing and growing and growing. I know that you know, there's no need for guessing it. When I'm requested, I'm there with no questions asked. The reason these lyrics struck me is that they actually answered the prayer and request I had made about a minute earlier. Suddenly I felt greater comfort and hope because I didn't feel so alone. Then I remembered all those times as a child I received help or signs. As a child, I used to see reptile and snake-like shadows all over my walls at night when I was trying to sleep. It used to terrify me until I started praying and stopped seeing the shadows. In fact, there have been a few instances where I have prayed for help and actually received what I was asking for. One of the first signs I remember receiving goes back to when I was 5 years old. It still remains as one of my favorite memories ever. At the time, I had survived a war in my home country, and my parents were very poor. We literally lost everything, and had no money or home. During the Christmas and New Year's season, a man gave my father a big package filled with chocolates and candy. He asked my father to give it to his child as a gift. This was great news for my parents because they could not afford to buy me any gifts, and this was all I was given. They told me the gift was from Santa, and like any child I was very excited. The first bit of chocolate I opened was a Kinder Surprise egg which contained a toy. This toy inside was special to me because it was an animal that was native to only one country, the country my parents were seeking to move to. My parents had applied for a visa to move there so that we could start a new life. However, the embassy told my parents that the documents we gave in were very old, and due to a large number of applicants, it was highly unlikely that we would be accepted. My parents almost lost hope, until a few days later I was surprised by the toy that represented the native animal of the country we were seeking residency in. My parents questioned if it was a sign, and sure enough, soon after, we received a phone call saying that we had been accepted, and our visa was granted. As a child, I didn't pick up on these signs, but eventually, I started to put everything together in my life, and I realized that God and His angels have always been there for me. I just never paid attention. My mother often says that as a toddler, I had conversations and laughed with invisible figures that no one could see. Some people said these were guardian angels watching over me while I stayed in the hospital as a toddler due to a few health problems. Perhaps they were right. Regardless, I have decided that all the signs of hope and support I have received in my life mean one thing. Angels are around us and they want to help. We just have to open our eyes, believe, and be grateful. Sometimes a sign can be right in front of our eyes, and we just don't notice.
Thank you for sending that inspiring story. I hope this gives you more hope and the faith that the angels truly are all around us, especially when we send our love to God and pray for His intercession in our lives. In our next story, a woman tells us of an encounter she had with an angel as a little girl. Here's her story.
I was raised in England, and as a little girl, loved to play in the nearby woods that surrounded our home. There were a great many little paths and a stream that ran through the woods that dropped down off a cliff to the sea. I spent most of my days hiding and playing among the trees. One day, I grabbed my bike and pedaled off to the woods. I remember pedaling so fast down one of the paths that I didn't even notice where I was going, nor did I see a tree root sticking up in the middle of the path, which had suddenly caught my front wheel. In the next moment, up I flew over the handlebars and landed flat on the ground, face down. Strangely, I didn't feel hurt, just shocked. When I got myself turned around, I was amazed to see standing there looking down at me, a man with blonde hair and blue eyes and wearing a blue robe. In a moment, he started walking away. I got up as fast as I could and started chasing after him, but he moved so fast through the woods that I lost him. When I returned to my bike, I noticed it was lying on the ground just inches away from the cliff's edge. Had I not been stopped, I would have fallen right off that cliff. From that day on, I was more careful to watch where I'm going, and I will never forget the time an angel kept me from falling off a cliff.
Thank you for that amazing witness. This story makes me wonder why God sends His angels to help some children, but not others. The only explanation there would be is that we are born with certain karma that is carried over from previous lives. Sometimes, our karma dictates that we are protected from harm, and sometimes we are hurt. Sometimes tragedy befalls us, and sometimes great success comes our way. Everything that happens to us in this life is due to good and bad karma that we created in this or in previous lives. Returning negative karma is one way of repaying our debt to God for misusing His energy. For more information about karma, check out the links in the video description. Our final story comes from a patrol officer who had some interesting help arrive after he was pushed through a window. Here's his story.
I am an armed patrol officer for a private security company. We had received a call that a warehouse on my route had a burglar alarm and an inside motion sensor alarm had also gone off. The 3 other officers that were on shift were all engaged in other calls, so I responded to the call on my own. This is not normally how we respond to a call at such a large property, but for 2 weeks the alarms at this particular property had some technical problems and were causing them to go off for no reason. When I arrived there, the window on the main door had been broken, and the door had been left open. I figured that the motion sensor alarm must have scared away whoever had broken in, so I continued in to see if there was any other damage. When I got through the offices and into the main warehouse area, I passed in front of the window looking into the supervisor's office. I remember seeing someone come out from behind a pillar that was about 6 feet away and push me through the window. The back of my head hit the edge of the supervisor's desk, and before I blacked out, I heard someone running away. I don't know how much time had passed by. I remember hearing someone calling out if there was anyone inside. I was still in such severe shock about what had happened that I couldn't talk, so I started kicking my foot against the wall. A police officer came through the window and immediately asked if I had feeling in my body. I just nodded my head as I still couldn't talk. He asked me if I was feeling overly tired at all, and I nodded again. He told me no matter what, I couldn't fall asleep and that I had to stay awake. He told me not to be afraid, and that as long as I stayed awake, everything was going to be okay. I started to shake because I thought that I was going to die. The officer took my hand and told me that help was almost there, and he was going to get the others and bring them to me. I quickly looked at his name tag so I could thank him later. It read Angel. Not more than a few minutes after he left to get the others, a second officer crawled through the window and yelled, "He's over here!" And paramedics and firefighters forced open the door to the supervisor's office. The next day, when I could start to talk again, I asked my dad to call the police department and send over the officer that found me, so I could thank him. I didn't mention his name. That night, the second officer that showed up came in. I thanked him for helping me, then asked when the first officer who found me was going to arrive. He told me that he was the first officer. I asked him how he knew I needed help, and he told me that I had called 911 from my personal phone and told them what happened and that I needed help. I told the officer that I hadn't been able to talk until that afternoon. He said I must have called before I lost my capacity to talk. The part I didn't tell him because I didn't want to look like a nut job was that I had left my personal phone in my patrol car, and that my coworker who took over my shift had brought it to the hospital when he finished the route. So who was the first responder who made the phone call on my phone? It must have been my guardian angel.
Thank you for sending in that incredible story. Thank God his guardian angel showed up at just the right time. Or maybe it was Archangel Michael, who was the sponsor or law enforcement officers. If you want to learn more about angels and Archangel Michael, click on the links in the video description. So that's it for our angel stories. Look for our next video coming soon. I hope you enjoyed these stories and they brightened your day. Please subscribe to our channel for more great content. Thank you.